All right, all right. So we'll go ahead and get started. Don't want you guys to be sitting around waiting forever. I'm recording this, so if you end up deciding, hey, I don't want my, um, I don't want my video on the internet at some point in time, feel free to hide your video. Um, Totally fine. And then second of all, if you decide you want to ask your question, I got a whole list of people's questions from that I put on an Excel sheet. So if you decide you want to ask your question live, feel free to do a little emoji or just raise your hand, and I'll call on you so you can ask your question live, and we can sort of go back and forth for a second. Thank you guys. Thank you all for getting involved in this. Hoping to be able to do this a little bit more regularly. Super fun thing to do. And I love talking about finance and all those other things. So this should be pretty fun. And it doesn't have to be too serious either. Also, if you're in the room and you just joined, or if you didn't just join, but if you're in the room and you're not asking a question or whatnot, please put your mic on mute. That way the video doesn't jump around and we don't hear all the background noise. And then last thing before we kick this off for real, remember, I am not a registered financial advisor. So everything that I say, these are things that I would do myself, but I can't give you literal advice that says, I know your situation. This is the stock to buy, or this is the way you should invest your money. This is all for education purposes only. So if you have any of those real hard questions that you want to take to an advisor, I can also point you in the direction to somebody that you can pay and talk to that's actually licensed still. But anyway, does anybody in the room, is anybody drinking? Nobody? Is it just me? Oh shit. Oh, we got one. Okay. Danny, introduce yourself and tell us what you're drinking.
I'm Danny. I'm from Jersey. And today I'm drinking lemon cucumber Voss.
Nice. I didn't even know they made flavors of Voss water. That's awesome. Respect. Yeah, I know Sean's got a cold water over here too.
Since I'm post-op, I just had kidney cancer.
Oh, right.
Drinking waters, but I'm tired of regular water, so add a little sparkling flavor.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Pretty good.
And how you feeling, man? You feeling good now, post-op?
I'm feeling good. Today, I was completely exhausted. I slept all day till like 4:30.
Oh, man.
So I just barely made it to this meeting. That's why I sent you a quick message. I didn't know what was going on. But other than that, I'm 2 weeks post-op. Everything looks good. I'm meeting with the oncologist next week via teleconference.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take it from there.
Love that, man. Well, I'm glad you're sort of at least out of the dark part of the woods, and looking forward for a speedy recovery, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. All right. So we got a bunch of people in the room. So does anybody, before I start on these Excel questions, does anybody want to jump out and ask their question, be first to get answered, or should I just go down the list?
You can probably just go down the list, probably. This is Malcolm here, guys. Sorry I don't have my video on my work computer, so
hey, it's okay.
You guys can hear me.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with you just going down the list here.
That's awesome. You know what? Since you spoke up, I guess we'll do your question first, man. All right, so the first question today, and if I do something crazy like look to the side, it's because I'm recording this on another camera, trying to get good about building the content, you know what I mean? So Malcolm's question is, can you go over your backup routine from start to finish after a shoot? So I'm going to do this one fairly quickly because I know a lot of people are here mostly to talk about personal finance and things of that nature. But I definitely want to hook you up with that question. And I can send you, I actually wrote an answer to a student on Skillshare about my backup process. So I have it already in written form that I can send you so you have that to reference. But essentially my backup situation is literally just, I have 2 drives that I use in the studios. They're on SSDs. I shoot to a computer, then I copy those files onto those 2 drives. So they're just copies of each other. I take one of those one of those hard drives to my home location, upload the whole session from Capture One onto my desktop at home, and then I take that stuff and I back that up to two different drives. Those two drives are one RAID 0, like sort of one of those big 16 terabyte hard drives, and then a secondary cheaper hard drive that's about the same size. I run Chrono Sync, so I always have a copy, two copies at home. And then throughout the year, I keep doing that for everything I shoot. At the end of every year, I turn around and then I have two new drives. I offload everything from the current year drive that's on my desk, and I offload those to two new drives, and then I move those two drives off to the closet. Ideally, I would like to have one drive in another location, but I live in New York and extra storage is a little tough. And then any finalized shots, like things that I've turned into a client, I make sure I have those in a folder on Dropbox. So there's always 3 copies of the final. There's always 2 copies of the actual raw plus working files. And then if I just did that shoot, there's usually about 4 or 5 copies going around, but you don't have to be that anal. It's just because I have a studio drive. So just always have 2 to 3 copies. That's really what you're going for. And if you can have a hard drive in a separate location from the hard drive that's your main copy, you're going to be in good business. And then put some stuff in the cloud just to be safe and ensure that you have your stuff. So
okay, makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, man. Welcome. I got some high school friends that have jumped in here. She's smiling. Hey, Jacqueline. And I got my homie from New York that moved to LA. You want to ask a question, Hotch, or was that a?
No, I was saying what's up to Zeph. What's up, Zeph?
What's up, Zeph? What's up, Gabe? We got Lordell. I haven't seen you in ages, man. We got Adam, who I only hang out with in Paris, even though he lives in New York. The whole crew's here. I love it. All right,
JB, JB, I will ask a question though, if you want to.
Love for that. Shoot.
What I was interested in when I was reading some of the details of your story is that and obviously just knowing you personally too, at one point it seemed like you paid off quite a lot of credit card debt.
Yeah.
So that is my life right now. I need to pay off a lot of credit card debt. So I wanted to ask about how you did that, and what your approach was to paying it off incrementally, or however you did it. I'm just looking for some feedback. For sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Hotch.
So credit card debt, that one is always a difficult one because for a lot of people, they have credit card debt in multiple places, whether that be several different credit cards, a student loan, et cetera, et cetera. But sort of the way that I went through it, when I first realized I was in a mess, I sort of ignored it. When I finally woke up and was like, oh, this is something I really want to take care of because I have a future that's way better than what I have on my back, I decided to just make the problem very small. So the first thing that I would do, and I'm just going to admit some people, I don't know why I didn't set this up so people could just join automatically. But the first thing I do, make the problem simple. So if you have different credit card balances in different places, so you have a 22% credit card, a 15, an 8 or whatever, find a balance transfer credit card that's running at 0%, for instance, for the next year or 18 months. Put everything in one place. That's usually the easiest way to make things simple. If you're the type of person that can just, stay on things, then don't worry about that because it'll be cheaper to not move things around most of the time. So make it simple. Then step 2 is you're going to want to attack the problem in 2 different ways. I forget which one, avalanche or snowball method. I forget which one does which. Welcome to the party, Quinn. Throw your mic on. Hey, throw your mic on mute real quick, just in case you bump your computer, so people don't get distracted. But welcome to the party. So there's 2 methods. There's snowball and there's avalanche method. I believe snowball is the one where you start with the smallest balance. It doesn't really matter. You can do it one way. Start with the smallest balance and just pay the max you can pay on that card, and all the other ones just pay the minimum balance. The other method is you could start with the highest interest rate, pay as much as you can on that balance, and then all the other balances just pay the minimum. And again, I don't know which method each one of those is called, but they're both fine ways to go after it. But the goal is to pay them off as fast as possible, no matter what your situation is. I think I personally am a finance guy, so I always start with the highest balance. But if you're one of those types of people that needs a good win, so if you have $5,000 on one credit card, 10,000 on another, and 1,000 on another, go ahead and knock out that $1,000 credit card first, because that helps you build a little momentum, and then jump on the 5,000, and then jump on the 10,000. But don't. I know there's a. We all want to do these things in a hurry because they represent sort of a pain center or something that we don't want to deal with. But as long as you have a game plan going in that says, okay, I have $15,000 worth of debt, and I have this much I can throw at it per month. It's about figuring out what is my timeline. And if you can get that timeline to under a year, you're golden. If you can get it under 2 years, you're still winning. Anything more than that, you probably need to attack maybe spending too much money on the expense side of the ledger, or maybe not having a budget so you can't allocate your dollars appropriately. But the way I did it was I just worked on the income side of my equation. I worked on the expenses side. So all the crap that I was doing, like going on trips that I couldn't afford, I cut out. I tried my best to raise my income by targeting new clients. All those things that you do, side hustles, etc. And then I literally just try to pay more than the maximum payment, and I didn't add any more expenses to any of my credits, any of my credit cards or anything like that. And in terms of paying more than the minimum, sometimes it started with paying the minimum every month, and then inside of that month, even though I didn't have any payments due, if I got an extra check in, because I know we both freelance, I would take whatever I didn't need to save for taxes or for groceries, shelter, and I would put, if I had to pay an extra $200 that month, I'd do it. Just like a mortgage, when you want to pay it faster, just throw some extra money, add some fuel to that, or add some fire extinguisher to that flame. So that's the way I sort of did it. And at the beginning, dude, I ignored it like a lot of people. And then it was once I got into the income state of mind where I was actually doing better that I could actually focus my energy. But if I knew what I knew now, I'd probably start, even if I didn't have a lot of income, I would just take the pain of not being sort of social and just go after it. Because now on the other side, I feel 100 times better. Did that answer it?
Yeah. Being social is not a problem now. I think I should be able to handle that.
Totally. Oh man, I think we were made for this quarantine sometime. Thanks for the question, Hotch.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to ask a question live, or I will go to the Excel spreadsheet that I've got collecting here.
Do you mind if I piggyback off of kind of what Sean was stating there?
Of course.
In regards to any sort of debt, paying that off. Now, in regards to investing, I know, I follow Dave Ramsey a lot. I kind of like his method. He always states, live like you're broke in order to pay off all the debt. In regards to investing in the stock market and any other investments, would you recommend or, paying off all debt, student loans, credit card debts, all that stuff before you even consider putting money towards the stock market? Or would you still try to invest in any kind of way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you'd be surprised every time there's a market crash. This happened in 2009 as well, 2008, 2009. All the questions are always lined up. Well, there seems to be an opportunity. Can I put all the other shit on pause? Excuse my language. I was just told the other day I cuss like a sailor. So let me reel that in. But I asked the other day the same question. And the reality is, I think there's a couple criteria, or it's actually really just one or two criteria that I think you need to meet before it's time to put money in the market. One is, do you have an emergency fund? And I know this, you probably hear this on all the podcasts and in all the articles. They all talk about emergency funds. And the reality of the emergency fund is it's boring to talk about, but it's one of those things that provides you clarity, security, ability to just walk through a storm like what we're going through right now without having to worry if you're going to be able to make rent or if you're going to be able to get back to work. So emergency fund is first. I have an episode on the podcast Freelance Kills that I mentioned the emergency fund and how to put it together. There's also a class there on Skillshare teaching these money habits. So if you're not familiar with the emergency fund, please brush up there. But in general, 3 to 6 months of savings, either based on your income or your expenses, is a good place to start. If you're freelance like me, I try to say 6 to 12 months, and I know that's a big hurdle. But like, for instance, now I have the security to be able to work on things like talking to you guys, building my podcast, my website, because I don't need to work. So the emergency fund is criteria number one and is the most important thing you can do for your life. Number two criteria, I would say, would be to have all of your debt crushed. So all consumer debt, not student loans. So credit cards, personal loans, payday loan, anything crazy like that, get that out of the way before you focus on investing for retirement or just in general goals like saving for a house or anything like that. So those are the two main criteria. If those are out of the way, then I think feel free to get involved, especially when you see an opportunity to market where it's down like this, to start putting money in. I don't believe in market timing, so there's no good time to invest. You should be investing and saving consistently and regularly. So don't try to worry about that kind of stuff. Get your situation in order and then worry about investing. The student loan thing, I throw that in as a sort of a curveball. If you can pay your student loans under 2 years, and a lot of people can, but they don't look at their situation in a way that would cause them any pain in order to get that student loan out of the way. So, and I'm going to allow for the flexibility. I'm not going to be Dave Ramsey with you today, but if you can get financially or statistically, whatever, if you can get your student loans paid in under 2 years, then you sitting out of the market isn't going to matter. I would just get that done. Focus all your energy on the student loans as well and be done with it. If it's going to take you longer than 2 years, and I'm looking at sort of doctors that are probably doing something that isn't in the high income bracket, because I know doctors that make anywhere from $350 to $500 a year. You have no excuse if you're one of those kind of doctors. But if you decided to do something different with your life and you're maybe making $150 to $200, and it's going to take you a couple more years longer to really start down that wealth building phase, then you can start, especially if your company has a 401k match or something like that. No problem with starting. I wouldn't do the max necessarily. I would still try to divert a lot of my income to my debt payoff. But if you have a 401k match or something like that, then definitely take advantage of the free money because it's compensation that your employer is giving you. But if you don't have something like that, I would still focus on the student loans. And then at the end of the day, if it's going to take you longer than 2 years for whatever reason you're choosing to let it take more than 2 years, you do have to give. There's just a reality that the longer you're out of the market, the less you're going to be able to participate in the average return of the market, which means you're going to be a bigger victim to the sequence of returns. So, the sequence of returns just means whenever you start to where you finish, that sequence of returns matters for where you're going to end up at the end in retirement. And the longer you can stay in the market, the more you smooth out your ride. Versus ending and the market crashes, or ending and the market's really up. You invest regularly every month, your ride starts to become smooth like this instead of choppy. So I hope that answers your question, Malcolm. Really good question, and a question a lot of people are dealing with on a regular basis. Anybody else? Oh,
thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem, man. Anybody else want to fire a question now, or should I hit the database here? All right, I'm going to hit the database. Just a reminder, if you have a drink, we can do a little cheers. I'm drinking some oatmeal stout, Samuel Smith stuff. Got a little coffee there, respect. All right, cheers everybody. Thank you for participating today. Fun times learning about finance during a crisis. All right, so let me go to another question that popped up today. And I'll do somebody that's on the line. I won't say your name just because you didn't raise your hand yourself, but we have a question that says, in this climate, what's the most important debt to focus on reducing first? So similar to what I just talked about, that's why I picked this question, it's easy. I think the main debts that we should be focused on are credit cards, personal loans, anything that is considered a consumer debt. Student loans can wait. And then just adding on to this question, if you are worried about your cash flow during this crisis, and nobody really asked this question, but I think it's important. If you're worried about your cash flow during this crisis, meaning you don't know if you're going to have a job in another week or two if this keeps going, your company has cut your pay by 40, 50%, you name it, any of those things, you got laid off and all you're collecting is unemployment, whatever it may be. If you're worried about cash flow, it is totally okay to postpone your debt repayment just until we're done, just until you're back in the workforce and generating income for yourself again. Because the last thing you want to do is end up in a cash flow pinch and then have to go back to the credit card. So it's totally fine to treat yourself with a little bit of stay of execution here and give yourself the space to get on the other side of this crisis. So great question from the unknown person who's smiling. All right. Lordale, do you mind if I say your name? Oops, I already said it. You have a question. You said, with my stimulus check, will it be a good idea to invest in some stocks now? Also, and this is in parentheses, also, I've never bought or traded stocks prior to this, but I've been hearing a lot of noise about investing as of late. So the number one thing, and I actually talk about this, I'm in a men's group on Thursdays, and we talk about following the news too closely. The number one thing that I'll recommend to anybody, especially if you're thinking about money, is to ignore all the noise, because there's very little signal in the noise. You're going to have a lot of people encourage you to jump in. This is the opportunity. But the reality is, like, if you jump in now and you don't have very much money and the economy goes bankrupt or something crazy happens, which I'm not saying will happen, then you have zero money and you only had a little to start with, right? So it isn't really about what's going on in the world, whether or not this is the right time to get involved. Let's go back to Malcolm's question. The right time to decide whether to get involved is when you have checked off the boxes for your stability. Once you've checked off the boxes for your stability, then it's about deciding what your goal is. If you're looking for retirement savings, then you can institute a plan. And honestly, anybody who's investing for the future, not necessarily retirement, anybody who's investing for a period of 10 years or more, all you need to do is think about what is my portfolio allocation that's going to let me participate in the ups and downs of the market without taking a ton of risk. And the way that I look at that, there's a couple different portfolios that you can check out for yourself. Core 4 portfolio by Rick Ferry is a great place to start. Portfoliocharts.com is a great place to start. Boggleheads, B-O-G-L-E heads.org, I believe. Great place to start. There's a great podcast called affordanything.com. She has a great primer on how to get started with investing. Again, I'm going to record this, so if you miss some of my URLs and stuff, I'll make sure that I put this in the show notes on the website. But all these people have a great place to get your beginning investor side started. But the reality is, you want to establish a portfolio with ETFs that are well diversified, that track some sort of index. So for instance, for one of my more simple portfolio allocations, I invest in the US stock market, every single stock. So it's called VTI is the ticker symbol, but it's the Vanguard Total Stock Index. It tracks not just the S&P, it tracks the entire US stock market. So I just participate with that ride, but it's smoother because it's a basket of stocks, like 1,000 stocks. Instead of owning one or two stocks, I don't have to participate with that sort of systemic risk. So anyway, so I have VTI as one of my items, ETFs, and the other one is just this. I believe it's a short-term treasury bond fund, whatever. That's just one of my simple ones. You can also sign up for a robo-advisor like a Betterment or something like that. That will do this kind of thing for you based on sort of a risk survey they give you. And then you just set it and forget it and just try to contribute once a month or whenever you feel like you're ready to keep contributing, you can do it that way. So there's a lot of ways to get in the market. Buying stocks is not the primary one if you're a new investor. And I think, and with your stimulus check. Okay, so if you strike all those other criteria, like if you don't have an emergency fund, stimulus check goes there. If you have debt to pay off, and you aren't worried about cash right now, use it to pay off the debt. If you got all those things taken care of, yes, get your investment portfolio started. And if you're somebody that, like for me, for instance, if I even get a stimulus check, I'm not sure if I will, but if I get one, I'm going to use the stimulus check to give to charity because I don't need the money. And that is not a braggadocious thing. That's just me saying, I'm going to have to pay for this money at some point anyway. Why don't I put it in the hands of somebody that can, do better, do more with it? So great question there. Anybody have a question they want to ask before I go to the next one? Yeah, Gabe, shoot it out.
Yeah, man. Because I think my question was something to the extent of like, could you speak to how you worked with like when your money is connected to something you do like for your art? It's like an emotional connection, and I'd like to speak a little bit more on that, like that question before I ask you, because it sounds like we're probably in different places. I'm an actor who started like photography like a year ago on accident, and like it's kind of turned into something. Mm-hmm. And it's not quite my livelihood. Acting is still my priority, but also I'm still paying my bills. Means the more money comes in from doing stuff I don't want to do. Right. So I think we're in different places, but maybe if you can talk to me about like, how you approach that when it wasn't so established for you, if that makes sense.
So if I had to rephrase it, would it be something like how do I face sort of this? Is it this juncture or just overall when I'm sort of at the beginning of an outbreak? Not an outbreak. That's a wrong word to use right now. But at the beginning of sort of hitting your stride, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay, so yeah, great question. The first 2 years that I was in photography, it was very ramen noodle-esque, and so I wasn't crushing it. And even in the 7 years that I've been doing this, I haven't had any sort of like mean reversal type of trends, but they haven't always been as good as the year before. So I typically scale my life just based on where I'm at. And I try to build my life, both my expenses, my lifestyle. I try to build that around where I'm at in my career at this present moment. And when I have years where I grow a little bit, I try not to grow the lifestyle with it. So my first 2 years, I think I maybe made $50,000 or $60,000, like the average American income in New York. I think it's 55, and I made that average. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. Definitely didn't, because that was 7 years ago. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I didn't have anybody to split my expenses with. I had already moved to Harlem because I quit finance. So I lived in a studio apartment that was tiny. So rent was like maybe $1,500 or something like that. And then when I realized this, when I stopped using my credit card, I didn't go out that much, or I didn't go out with money I didn't have. I only spent like the cash that I could pay that with. I didn't like, as a photographer specifically, I didn't go out and buy gear that I didn't need. And by didn't need, I mean, I needed to have rented that thing or used that in a shoot several times before I actually acquired that gear. So I sort of kept my lifestyle in a place where my fixed costs were always down, but my variable costs I could always move with whatever my market was at that time. And just treat it like that. And if you think about sort of your budget as percentages in terms of what you're saving for taxes, what you're saving for retirement, what you're saving for, household goods or whatever, you can always just play around with those percentages and don't feel the need to oversave if you don't have the money. I tend to like to save I have a negative budget, so I tend to start with the savings rate and then let everything else take care of the rest. And that allows me to not have any extra money at the end of the month to spend. So if I say, I'm going to save half my income, if I already paid the rent, my utilities, my this, my that, and I still have a little extra money, I've already saved 50%. So if I want to go out and buy a new, a cycling bike, or if I want to go on a trip with my girlfriend, well, that's free money at this point because I already allocated taxes. I already allocated my regular savings rate. So you can do it that way. I think that sort of answers the question about sort of lifestyle flexing. But you had another part of that question. I think I missed it. So if you want to tap back into that, let me know.
No, I think that you basically knocked the question out, because I was talking about the emotional component. And also maybe, it sounds like you're a little bit more pragmatic than I am naturally. So maybe you approach it probably differently than I do.
No, but I can hit you with the emotional side. I mean, especially this last 2 years since I started getting in therapy, it really has opened my eyes to like being in touch with how, money is a big part of emotion. So is relationship, friendships, being quarantined at home. So I totally get it. When I started my career, I was in a dark period of time. So the honest truth is, like, there were things that I ignored. And so I can sound more pragmatic after the fact, but when I was in it, I wasn't necessarily like, I've got to scale this. It was sort of a natural way that I had always lived my life, but I was suffering. When I started on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs, I made six figures like signing a piece of paper, right? So to go from that to the first job I had after finance was an intern with zero money attached. And that was like the first time I took that ego hit to my stomach. And I slowly, because I went all the way from this to zero, my emotional track was more of a build-up period. And I went through the darkness because I was kind of lost about am I actually going to make it in photography? Am I going to this and that? And so a lot of that time I did ignore my finances. That's like the period of time. The first 2 years is where I racked up half the credit card debt. So I think things like this, like the opportunity to Q&A with people that are maybe ahead of you in the path, or all the things that are available these days, I think we're giving ourselves the opportunity to skip some of the steps that a lot of us made, some of the mistakes a lot of us made. So it's not that I'm 100% pragmatic, and I totally get where you're coming from on the emotional tip. I would say don't beat yourself up over slow growth. Don't beat yourself up over not being able to tackle all the goals at once. Like if you can't pay off the debt right now, it's okay. Like if you or if you can pay off the debt but you can't do something else that you really want to do, that's okay. Do the things that you can actually manage and keep your emotional health in good balance, and then you'll break. Once you break out, start tackling them. Now, I will set one parameter. If your breakout doesn't happen for a year or 2 years, you got to give yourself a cutoff period for when you're going to start taking certain things very serious. And wealth building is vis-a-vis debt payment is part of that. But wealth building is a huge part of it, especially as people of color. And this is not just for people of color. I'm saying that as a black person, but especially for people of color, people from lower income brackets. That piece is such a significant piece, especially when you're 30 years down the line, that you're going to smack yourself if you didn't give it the right attention this early on. So I think that maybe circles back and hits the question the way you asked. Good. Thank you for the question, Gabe. I appreciate that. Anybody else want to toss out a question? Yeah, Jacqueline, shoot it out.
So this was actually a follow-up to your question, or 2 questions ago, about you saying that you're going to have to pay on the money that you're receiving if you receive a stimulus check. I thought it was non-taxable income. So what did you actually mean about having to pay back on that money?
Oh yeah, this is me thinking a couple steps ahead. I'm literally just saying, and if I do get one, I'm probably going to have to pay some back as a rebate or however that works. It does based on the income limits. So if you do make a certain amount of money, you get the stimulus check. Because they base it on 2018 because you didn't file taxes for 2019, and then they find out in 2019 that you made more than you would qualify you for stimulus, you will have to pay it back. So part of what I was saying was that. The other part of what I was saying was, in general, this thing that they call a stimulus check, which is really just a relief check. In reality, all of us as Americans, especially people that are millennials, we're going to have to pay this back because at some point the government's going to have to make good on some of their promises to other countries that are buying our debt. So that's what I mean. It's just like when you take advantage of these programs, whether it's unemployment or it's a stimulus check or it's whatever it may be, eventually it all weighs on all of us. Well, at least people that do pay taxes. I know there's a lot of people that don't have the means and don't pay taxes every year, so they won't have to pay this. But in general, I think, at least from the faces that I know on here, we are going to have to pay this as American citizens. So that's all. But if I don't think the more important point is, if you need it, feel no shame about taking it or using it for whatever reason you use it. Trust me, if I was in need, I would take it. This is it's an opportunity for me to do something good with it that I otherwise would just sit in my bank account like everything else. Like I just want to, there's few opportunities that you can say, I saved for this and be able to give back in some way. And that's one of the ways that I'd like to try to give back, besides doing events like these where I can give people advice. So that's what I meant. You'll be okay. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I just, I guess from your podcast, I found out that the stimulus check is based on your gross adjusted income.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I wasn't eligible, but once I checked out my gross adjusted, I got a check. I got a check for about $900, and instead of using the money, I just used it to pay off my Nordstrom card,
Nice.
which was $7,000 like 12 months ago, and now it's zero.
Oh, that's epic.
Yeah, I'm a big Nordstrom guy. I'm all about customer service.
Dude, I'm raising a glass to you, man.
Yeah.
You got a credit card paid off, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah, so
Respect.
now it's gone. Now it's gone. So.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
And Nordstrom is closed. So
yeah, you beat them to the punch, huh?
Yes.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that as well. Obviously, anybody else too, if you have a story that you want to share, or you have sort of a real circumstance that you're going through right now that you want to share, feel free, if you don't mind sharing in this public forum in that way. Or if you even have a success that you want to talk about, I think everybody can benefit from that and learn from that. So feel free. It doesn't just have to be a question, even though I said question and answer. We'll get a little loosey-goosey with the storytelling if you want. Anybody have Jacqueline, shoot it out.
So I think Tarek may have sent you the question.
Yeah.
About how do you, so like in this climate that we're in, interest rates are super low for mortgages. So how do you discern whether or not you should be considering refinancing? Like we kind of have an idea about, we do have to consider closing costs, but at the end of the day, if the closing cost lump sum that you have to pay outweighs the amount that you're actually saving by refinancing, do you go forward with it just because maybe it looks better and you have a lower interest rate, or like how should we look at it? We're not necessarily financially minded to consider like the long-term impact of, what that lower interest rate actually means against your mortgage payment currently and equity and all that stuff.
Number one question, you've already sort of lined up how this should look. So if you can actually, I think on places like creditkarma.com, I think maybe the New York Times has a mortgage calculator or refi calculator, but you can actually just go into a refi calculator and type in all these numbers that you have. And I'm just going to be very topical, not dive deep. But so there are these different considerations. There's closing cost, there's the amount of interest saved. And those two things are the biggest proponents. So if you're going from say a percent, like 100 basis points, which is 1%, from 4% to 3%, right now I think it would be closely more like you went from 4 1/8 to like 3 1/8 or something like that. But if you can save 1 percentage point, you're going to put that in the calculator. If your closing costs are going to equal the same amount of the savings and interest, you don't need to do it. It's pointless. The only way it would make sense is if you're going to go from say a 15-year to a 30-year, or you're gonna change the sort of duration of that mortgage. Then obviously you're changing another variable, which is going to end up saving you in the long run. It's going to change what you save in interest. If it's not, there's no definition to this, but if it's not meaningful money. For instance, like if you're doing all this paperwork and all this effort to get your credit pulled and do all this stuff, and you're only going to save yourself $1,000, and I know that's meaningful to a lot of people, but if we're talking about mortgages, then $1,000 shouldn't be the most meaningful sum of money that you've come in contact with. So if you're doing all of that work to save $1,000 over 15 years, not worth it. But if you can chop off, $500 a month, that's meaningful money, right? Because say you have 10 more years left in your mortgage or something, $500 a month for 12 times 10 years, that's a lot of money. So I think, and it wouldn't be that much, it would never be that much, it'd be more like 50 or 60 bucks a month, but you get where I'm going with this. The point is, it needs to be a threshold that's actually meaningful to you. Another way of looking at it is opportunity cost. If I could easily take what I'm saving from this interest rate and I could put that in my retirement account or pay off other debt that I have or whatever, and that's part of that bigger pot of meaningful money, then by all means do it. But just make sure it's worth it. You just really want to beat the cost, but you want to beat the cost and then some. Otherwise, it's not worth the effort. I think that answers it. I also too would, if you have the opportunity to go, and you don't actually need to do this, but people that have 30-year conventional mortgages, if you can do a mortgage in 15 years, do it. You don't have to refi to do that. You can also, another way of looking at your question is like, okay, maybe it doesn't look like it looks like I'm going to break even if I refi a 30-year to a 30-year. And I promise I won't stay on this topic too much longer. But if I refi my 30-year mortgage at 4% to a 0.25% down, 3 3/4% for another 30-year, but I plan on using, this new income or my new budget to make an extra mortgage payment every month, so paying down principal, then you've actually saved yourself money in a bigger way than you'll be able to see on your mortgage calculator. So those are the things you got to look at and play around with. If you're not making extra payments, and you can do a straight oranges to oranges comparison. If you are making extra payments, then definitely take a look at what that interest saves on the term and on the interest rate, because that'll help sort of magnify your savings. Thank you for the question, Jacqueline. Anybody else got a question? Oh, Adam, dude, I might force you into a question. I'm just playing. It's good to see you though.
Cheers, man. How are you? Yeah, sure. I'll have an annoying question.
Oh, yeah, do it.
So given all your prudence, how much of your budget do you reserve for entertainment, having fun?
Okay, so great question. Adam asked, how much money do I set aside for entertainment, having fun? And this goes back to I think the answer I gave, crap, now I forget who asked the question about, I think Gabe, I was talking to Gabe about it a little bit, but I have a negative budget. So
Oh, you did say that.
yeah, so essentially I just work backwards from, okay, I want to save, I put aside 30% for taxes, which I know I'm not going to ever have to pay that much. But I set aside 30% for taxes. I have a weekly draw on my account that goes right into my investing. And then besides that, I probably save from every paycheck from that 30% of taxes, I probably add another like 10% or so. So saving is so baked into my program that everything that's left over, I'm like, if I want to do it, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? So I think it works out to be about, I end up overall, and excuse me if I say too many numbers that are real life, but I think transparency is the best way to teach finance. I think it works out where my effective tax rate ends up being somewhere around 22%. And remember, marginal tax brackets, they step up. So I'm not paying everything at 22%. But effective tax rate's around 22%. Even though I already saved 30% for taxes. I save something like, this is gonna sound crazy, but I don't know how to put in percentage, so I'm just gonna say a number. I save like $1,500 a week that goes into my investment account. Let me re-say that. $1,500 a month that goes into my investment account. So that ends up being what, like 4K or so, 4.5K on like 4-week months, and a little bit more or less on 5-week months. And that goes right into investments. Another $500 I put into a e-REIT every month, once a month. And then I'm trying to think if there's any other, and then sometimes I get money like Skillshare royalties, for instance, where I just take, if the whole check or 70% of the check, and just throw it in my emergency fund, which is also my build a house fund or whatever, and just set that aside too. So literally, if I had to guess percentages, I might spend like 30 or 40% of my income on fun and life expenses, and everything else just goes straight to savings. And I'm doing that, it's good to give yourself a reason for why you're doing that stuff. I'm doing it because I came from nothing. I'm doing it because like, I don't want to do this forever. Like I would prefer to do this once a week for the rest of my life, giving guys like you, guys and girls like you, advice and helping people. And even if I do make money off of it, but helping people with their finances and shooting for fun, like I'd prefer to do that the rest of my life. So if I can get out the rat race at 40, whatever, that's cool. And that's why I save. And it's also easier, and it's really nice to have a girlfriend where I don't feel compelled to be extremely social. I'm already a homebody anyway. But the one thing I'll say to answer your question in a real way is that it is really good if you set percentages that are accurate to how you actually want to behave. Because if you try to be too aggressive by cutting your budget down for fun, because I know you like to go out a little bit. If you
Attacked. I was about to say.
I know it's coming. It's coming. But that's serious, dude. If you enjoy going out, especially before you're married or whatever, by all means do it, man. You're only young once. But make sure you don't set your target of like, I want to go out so much less than what I actually am comfortable going out, because then you're just gonna break your budget every single time. So try to be accurate with how you actually feel. Don't be too aggressive, and then slowly, just like how you save when you get an increase, like an income from a job. If you have a full-time job, every time you get an increase from a full-time job, you should bank some of that money as a part of your savings rate. Don't take all the raise and put it into your fund. So just like you would do that, if you need to start with, I'm going to save 30% of my life for entertainment, every year take a percentage away from yourself. Until you're at the married age or wherever, where you start to really slow down, or whatever you get to, and then and then you find yourself at a more reasonable percentage. And I'm not attacking you, I promise. But great question, dude. Where are you, by the way?
South of France right now, but quarantine.
I don't feel bad for you, Adam.
Nobody feels bad for you, south of France. Working on my startup. I love it.
But actually.
No, seriously, I respect it, dude. You're a startup, dude. We might have to get you on here at some point. Maybe we'll do Maybe we'll do a Q&A about
my finances. 3 years in the startup game.
No, not about your finances, dude. I wouldn't hurt you like that. I would just to talk about what it's like to try to build a business from scratch.
I'm happy to.
I'm sure everybody in here and anybody who would have joined would love to talk to you about that. So
would love that.
We'll keep it as an idea. Anybody else have a question they want to throw out, or should I hit the Excel spreadsheet? What's up, Small?
Actually, real quick question. Just got to go back on budget. What do you use personally for managing your budget? Is it all through Excel? Do you have an Excel like template that you personally use, or do you use an app or anything like that?
Malcolm, this is going to sound horrible, but it's honest. I don't use a budget at all. That's sort of that negative budget thing. I basically and you know, at the beginning of things, I didn't budget as well. I'm like a math person, so I typically know exactly. I match every check to every single expense I have in my head. So I'm like, okay, I know I just earned $3,000 here. That pays rent. This does that, and I'm on a fluid basis. But now that I'm established, I use a negative budget, meaning I just do a savings rate and then everything else goes that way because I have an operational cash account. So I already have plenty of money to cover my expenses for say 6 months in one account. And then I have an emergency fund on top of that. I basically shored up my balance sheet so much that I don't need the balance sheet. I just need to make sure that I always take 50% of every check and put it aside and keep a rolling sort of thing like that. But if you're looking for budget software, I've always been a big Excel fan, but that's because I was a trader. So you could use Excel if that works for you. I still use Excel because I run a photo studio as well. So I track my income and expenses on an Excel sheet, and I use one tab per month to track, your cash flow things. Outside of that, as a more like sort of consumer level budgeting software, YNAB is an app that I hear tossed around a lot. I've never used it, but I've heard a lot of people say that they really like using that. It's YNAB. They also have a podcast too that might be worth checking out. I like, and I've never used this at all either, but I really like the concept behind Dave Ramsey's. I think it's called Every Dollar. I think it's called Every Dollar.
Every Dollar.
So I like that one a lot too, because the idea, especially for people that are in debt, it might not make as much sense for people that are already on a good path. They know what they're doing. They're not really big spenders. They more have a savings mentality. It might be a little too tight for you, but if you're the type of person that spends too much, has a little bit of debt issues, then Every Dollar is a great app, especially because the whole concept is every dollar gets a name. So it really forces you to really assign value to the things you have in life. So that's a good option as well. If I think about some other options, I know I have a blog post somewhere where I either wrote down some options, and it might not be published right now, but there might be a couple links. So I'll add them to the show notes after this session, and I'll send everybody a link to the blog post that goes up. So anything we talk about, hopefully I'll link and reference everything, so you always have sort of a resource to turn back to. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
For sure, man. Anybody else have a question before I jump into the Excel? One quick review. This beer is absolutely delicious, and I'm only revisiting this because my buddy Small, that's in that Jacqueline Small window, is here, and that's my food couple. We hang out all the time and drink. It's an oatmeal stout, really dark. It's not even that thick on the tongue, or that's a weird thing to say, but the mouthfeel isn't so thick. It's actually really smooth. It's a little lighter than Guinness, even though it looks like Guinness. It's really nice. If you see this at Trader Joe's or something, pick it up. All right, so if no questions are out there in the group, I will go to another question. By the way, raise of hands to people that are on video. How many of you guys work for yourself versus how many of you guys have a full-time job? I'll go full-time job first. All right, we got 2 out of a lot. Okay, and the rest. Oh, you too, full-time job?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so three out of the 10 people. How many of you guys? The rest of you guys freelance or self-employed or in school? Awesome, that's what's up. All right, so. Oh, and I never said this, but shout out to you, Jay. I see you there lurking. All right, so let's go. I will try to find a question that's sort of in the middle of these things. Here's a great one. So one of the guys that didn't show up on the show today, and then that's not a call out, he probably has something to do. What is the best way to transform your mindset from lack to wealth? And I think it's like lack of wealth to wealth, especially when you have been through a rough financial patch and have those scars. So this really probably leans on sort of what Gabe was asking about in terms of how do you attack sort of the mindset from an emotional angle as well as the overall angle. And I literally just wrote a post on Medium, which I'll link as well, about sort of the biggest secret to understanding personal finance is dealing with the emotional piece first, because you would be surprised if any of you guys have ever gotten in an argument with a girlfriend, spouse, a best friend, whatever. If you've ever been in a bad place in a relationship and then also had a problem with your finances, what did you do to your finances? Ignored them, right? Like you didn't pay any attention to them. If you're at the beginning of your career and you don't have much money to work with, one of the hardest things in the world is to look at your finances, because you know the bank account is going to look small today, it's going to look small tomorrow, and it's going to look small for 3 months. You know, so how do you transition that mindset? I think the first thing, and one of the most important things that I can stress, and I'm not a therapist, but it's something that's worked for me, is working on my self-alignment. Understanding what are those things that actually make me happy, both about my job, about the people I choose to spend the most of my time with, about the things I actually purchase. Like I used to spend money a lot on cocktails, which I still do only occasionally, but I used to spend a lot of money going out to hang out with people that I didn't really value, but I wanted the validation from. I used to buy more clothes. Now I shop maybe twice a year. There's a lot of things that I used to do that I don't do anymore. When I realized the things that made me happy, like PlayStation 4, which is literally a one-time purchase plus a couple games, honestly, NBA 2K once a year. I mean, like once I got into that mindset, you go from spending, thousands of dollars on clothes and going out with people to $300 or $500 a year on a PlayStation. And I get to spend all that time at home without being stressed out about my validation and all these other things that go on with social interaction. And that might not be for everybody. I mean, some people might be car people. I happen to have a classic car that is a money hole. And so I understand that too. Whatever your thing is, we don't all have 20 things. We have like 1 or 2 things. So focus your energy. If you're going to spend any money, focus your energy on those things, because they're going to return on your happiness, ROH, a lot higher yielding than trying to throw your money at everything just to fill those holes emotionally that aren't going to be filled by spending money. And that self-alignment is the same thing that will shine through your career as well. So if you are in a job that you do not like, that's okay. But how can you start pivoting your life to be better aligned with the things that are going to drive your happiness? And I say this, and I want to make a very big caveat. We all won't get to do jobs that we love for a living. That's just life. Even I don't love photography all the time, but there's a quote, and I don't have this because my iPhone is recording right now, but this woman basically said something that I've always said was, don't try to make your passion make you money. Because the minute you make something that you really, really love doing, something that's going to generate money for you, the minute it becomes actual work, it's not a passion anymore, or it's only 1 part passion, 1 part pain. And so you have to be careful about the way you flex your life and your lifestyle and the things you do for a living. And you got to be very accurate or you got to find your way to that accuracy and precision about what things actually make you happy. And I know that's easier said than done. It took me a good 3 years to figure out half of these things, and another 2 years to get on the right glide path. And now I feel great about all these things. But whatever you can do to sort of learn more about yourself, learn more about work, learn more about all these things, those will help you get further along the path of financial literacy. It'll make you more successful in the work that you do. That's such a weird way to put it, but the work that you do and the people that you hang out with. I mean, everything fleshes itself out the more aligned you are with your happiness. You stop hanging out with people that don't return a lot to that don't invest in you, like all those things will straighten out. So that's my answer to that question.
I just wanted to add that, I'm in public service.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a police officer for about 13 years. I was in the military for 11 years. I absolutely, and my job does not define me.
Mm-hmm.
My photography does. and that, just, I don't necessarily hate my job, but it doesn't have that much fulfillment. And when I got into photography, I try to monetize it. And I realized that that was the wrong thing that I was doing, because I was worried about the money aspect of it. But instead, I should have been doing it as an artistic form for me to feel balanced enough and happy enough for me to enjoy my job, to, sustain a living.
Right.
And use photography as a way to, be creative, So I just wanted to add with that. I love helping the public, but the public doesn't make me creative. It doesn't make me happy.
Right.
And when I try to add money into my photography, I started realizing that I'm gonna be working on somebody else's vision, not mine. That's something I just wanted to add. I don't know if it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to add to that.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's one. Thank you for sharing that, because that's awesome. That's real life stuff, and that just furthers the point that the reality, and obviously this won't be the same for everybody, but the reality is, when you try to monetize something that you care about in the heart, you just add a lot of complications to things. And complexities, especially in the creative field, complexities that don't deserve or need to be there. A lot of my creativity is creativity for clients, so it's actually it's a mandate. It's not me just being creative for the sake of it. I do creative works that aren't for anybody else but me, like 4 times a year maybe, and that keeps me excited about what I do. But I always, one thing I wanted to add or echo about what you said is that, and everybody's cheering, so I'm going to do a little clap for all the healthcare workers and also you, my friend. But one thing that is important about one thing that is important about what you just said is that, how do I want to phrase this actually? Passion. Oh, got it. Here we go. One thing that's super important about how you said that is that the reality is, if you love something and you have a job, especially if it's a decently or really well-paying job, you can get just as much return on your happiness from doing that thing on the side as you would if you made it full time. And sometimes it decreases how much you get out of that when you make it a job. So, I always stress to people that are looking to transition from a full-time job to freelance, like, first, see if you enjoy it as a side hustle. See if you can actually make some money doing it as a side hustle before you start painting this picture of like, I'm jumping in head first, because you can really end up in some muddy waters where you start hating what you do, and now you've already left a job that was paying you, great amount of money. So always think about that as you start to sort of, work your way through the career conversation. But thank you for sharing that, Danny. Appreciate that. Anybody else have any questions? I know we're dwindling down and we just hit 7 o'clock. I'm happy to go 30 more minutes. I have a couple questions here I can answer, but if anybody has any questions, I'd rather give you guys the priority before I jump on these. Anything come up for anybody?